Now that I have finished creating the Highfield Color Layer digital asset, I want to share some tips that helped me pick suitable colors for the landscape. And the first thing I want to go through is using the color picker, because it can get a bit confusing to begin with, and it certainly took me a while to be able to accurately pick colors. Often I like to try and pick colors from an image. You could do that from an image of a terrain, but very often they have lighting information, so the values aren't always accurate. A little bit of a cheat that I like to use is to go to a website like textures.com, and you don't need to log in. Let's just search the library for, and first we want a grass texture, so let's search for grass. And I actually want a tiling texture. Let's choose one of these and scroll down, and here we can see a diffuse map, an albedo texture. So here we have this straight albedo values. And so what I can do is if I middle mouse click on this particular swatch, but let's give us some space. Let's put this over here, and our prize over here. I can middle mouse click on this swatch and drag and drop over to my browser and sample this color. Now you probably noticed that this color that I've selected does not match the thumbnail here in the web browser. Why is that? Well, if I left click on the thumbnail, I want to come over and disable apply color correction. And you can see those values have got slightly darker. And so now when I middle mouse click and sample from this viewport, we can now see that value now matches the color that I'm sampling from the image. So let's grab some additional color values. Let's come to this forest clover and sample our lowlands. Next, I want some sand. So let's pick one of these sand colors. There we go, that's a good starting point. That's all these are. These are just kind of a starting point to get you going. You can always come through and adjust these, but it's always nice to have a good starting point to begin with. Next, I want some rocks. Let's choose these pebbles here. Next, we want some debris. I can choose another area of the same color. So let's search again for sand. This one will work. I can max speed these again. So now we've got some colors as a starting point. And as I said, these are only a starting point. We can now go through and adjust these slightly because I want a bit more variation. So if I click on this color wheel, it's swapped to RGB, and I can click again to swatch to HSV, so hue saturation of a value. So I can use this to kind of increase the brightness. Let's switch to on update, auto update. So now I can see it updating in real time. So we can use these to adjust the colors. Let's bring the value up here. You might think, okay, we're now picking the right colors, but if you look closely, we actually aren't seeing the exact color in the viewport. If I zoom in here and middle mouse click from this sand color and sample it again from our landscape, we can see that's changed color. That's got slightly brighter. So the color that we're seeing in the viewport doesn't match the color that's in our parameter. There's two things affecting that. First of all, we've disabled color correction on color picker, but our image in the viewport is also being color corrected, and we can disable that by coming down to this eye icon, right clicking on it, checking color correction, coming here to where it says untoned map and clicking raw. So that's removed any color correction from our viewport. And the second thing that's influencing the color that we see in the viewport is if I come up to before our color map, we actually see we've already got this kind of default gray on our landscape. And so that's why our image is looking darker than it should do, is because we've got this grey default material that's already on it. Want to bring up the display options for the viewport, you can either click this eye icon down here to bring it up, or hover over the viewport and hit D. And if you come over to this material tab, we've got a diffuse material here. So if you click this thumbnail and hit white, this landscape will now go white. Now when I view my height field color layers, now we're seeing these colors displayed correctly in the viewport. I just want to make sure I switch to unlit to remove any lighting values. Now when I middle mouse click on my sand parameter and sample from the viewport, it stays the same color. So now we're seeing these colors that we're seeing here in the swatches accurately displayed in the viewport. Now I have encountered a bug in some cases that if you have a height field visible in the viewport and you change this parameter, it doesn't update like this. It doesn't update. In this particular case, it has worked. Sometimes I come across it doesn't. I just thought I'd interject here and demonstrate that bug. I've actually gone in further into the video series, encountered it, so I've just thought I'd record it and insert this clip here just so I can show you the bug that I was talking about. So I'd saved my Houdini file, closed it, and I've come back and reopened it, and the display settings that I'd set have reset, and my colors aren't looking as they were when I had previously saved the file. So you can see it's gone back to displaying it as no longer in raw color. So I'm going to switch back to raw, and as you can see, my colors are now looking dark. And if I just come back to before my height field color, we can see it's got that gray material back on it. So it's no longer white. So I'm going to open up the display settings, come over to material, and you can see although it's set as simple material to diffuse, actually it's still grey. And if I change this color to something else, you can see it's not updated. So it should be showing this color, but it isn't. The way to get around this, I'm just going to add a box here. I've attached the height field as the input on the box, so it makes the box the same size as my height field, so I can easily see it. We can see there, it looks like it's white on this box, but not on my height field. So I'm going to open up the display properties again by hitting D, whilst hovering over the viewport, and then on material, let's set this to a different color. Okay, that's changed to red. Set it back to white. Now we can close the display settings, take a look at height field, and now our height field is white. So it looks like when you're displaying geometry in the viewport, the material will update correctly when I change it, but not when I'm viewing a height field. So that's how to get around that bug. Let's take a look at the height field. We actually need to update the settings on our color as well. So let's click a swatch, and then we want to click apply color correction to disable it. And now these colors will match. So that's something to be aware of. When you close down Houdini, these settings may not have saved. So hopefully that will help you avoid encountering that bug or getting around it. Some other tips for when creating the color map. The color map, when we export it and bring it into Unreal, we'll be multiplying it on top of the tiling textures. So you don't want any of these to be too dark, because if your tiling texture is already quite dark and then you multiply a dark color on top of it, it will get even darker still. So what I'd like to do is if I switch to unlit mode, I'm going to hit the Windows key and then search for color filters. And there is an option here to some accessibility options. If I hit enable color filters and switch to grayscale, it will set my entire view to grayscale. And there's also a keyboard shortcut here I can enable, which is Windows key Control C. So Windows Control C, I can enable and disable that filter, and make my viewport black and white. And this is a really handy way to remove the color information and just see the brightness values. And I can very clearly see which areas are dark and which areas are bright. So my riverbeds are quite dark, my lowlands is slightly darker, and you do want a bit of a range in value. You don't want them all kind of the same value, you do want a bit of variety, but you might just want to make sure you bring up some of these values. And so you kind of want some values that are around the same area. So kind of a little bit above maybe 0.5, 0.4, just somewhere kind of mid-range. Nothing that's too dark, and nothing that's maybe super bright. Okay, so there's a good starting point. As I said, you can always come back and adjust these values. What I'd always suggest is getting a version exported, get it into Unreal, preview it, and then you can come back and make amendments and iterate between Houdini and Unreal until you get a color map that works best for you. So those are just some tips on how to use the color picker and how to start checking your values and making sure you're kind of building a color map that's kind of usable inside of Unreal. In the next video, I'm going to be building a color adjustment digital asset that we can use to adjust the hue, saturation, and value of our color map, as well as just adjusting the gamma. And we'll also add the option to add a mask so you can pick and choose which areas of the height field color you want to adjust.